All right, so let's find out the bad news first. Little polling question for you. Oh, I should have stopped it after the first two responses. How many of us are there? Actually, I might do a quick roll call while we're here. If you just jump on the poll. 77% of people voting. Oh, there you go. I got another yes. I might stop it there. That's about as good as I'll get, I think. Yeah, what tends to happen, can you see the poll results? We've been more yeses than nos most weeks. I know these last couple. The good news is these are, in a sense, self-contained topics. So if you go back and look at it, you know, watch the Zoom recording, and then obviously maybe if you've watched the Zoom recording, you get a bit of a sense that we're going to talk about for the next 45 minutes or so about all the important stuff to have a look at. You'll get a better sense of it. But this is an interesting topic. This is something, I think I said before, I'm not a social psychologist really. My interest more in biological psychology, neuropsychology. But the social stuff is really, really interesting. There's some important applications, and I keep talking about this notion of understanding yourself is a really, really important thing. You know, you're the most important, who you are is the most important thing to your success in the health professions than how much stuff you can remember from these classes. But there's some important things, particularly when it comes to understanding ourselves, and particularly when it comes to judging other people, the way we think, heuristics, our mental shortcuts, social biases, etc. Although most of you won't know about that yet if you haven't had a look at it. But hopefully, as I said, when you catch up with it, this will make a little bit of sense, and that you will get some interesting stuff out of it as well, hopefully. Or the good news is, if anyone didn't watch it and you're a Kanye fan, Yeezy fan, then you missed me insulting him. So any Yeezy fans didn't watch it, just skip over the bit where you see a photo of Kanye and Freddie Mercury. Otherwise you might get upset like a few people. All right, yeah, social psychology, pretty straightforward. I don't think I asked you anything definitional about that, but it's about our ABCs, attitudes. I keep saying attitude today. Affect, behavior, and cognition, you know, our psychology, how it applies to social situations, how we influence people, how people influence us. So this week, it's a little bit more on attitudes, our likes and dislikes, as well as the way we think, our social thinking, which is really, really important. Next week, we're going to talk about some really, really interesting interpersonal processes to do with compliance and obedience and conformity. That's probably where some of the most famous and well-known psychology studies. So next week's topic, I think, is probably, for me, if you like the psychological disorders stuff, there's some interesting stuff in that. But next week's topic is really some really, really interesting and maybe shows some of the dark side of our nature as well. The other thing next week, I do want to show you a video, a TED Talk video that I think really captures some of the themes of this course, but particularly in these last couple of weeks. And it's something that I will ask you a question in the exam on, that'll hopefully give a chance for you to sort of apply some of your learning to understanding the way the world works a little bit as well. But we'll see how we go with it anyway. Anyone know what an attitude is? I might ask you about attitudes. Anyone want to contribute?
How we think about something?
Yep. Yeah, so we can talk about how we think, sometimes how we feel, how we behave. So it does involve all of our psychology, but for the exam, definitely know what attitudes are. And it's not good and bad. which is like a lot of that stuff, right? But we can talk about positive attitudes. We can talk about negative attitudes. We can talk about ambivalent or sometimes neutral attitudes as well. I was joking yesterday. How did I go about the positive and negative there? Have I got anything on the wrong side for anybody, or?
Game of Thrones.
I don't like Game of Thrones.
Agreed.
The ending.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
What's wrong with Zubat?
Sorry?
What's wrong with Zubat?
Oh, yeah. So that's come back a little bit, hasn't it? Is that right? There's people getting back into that. Kardashians, that's probably a sensitive topic. I probably should have deleted that just out of respect after 20 seasons. Is that right or something? I was talking about that yesterday. I never actually watched it. So yeah, key thing, it's basically favorable and unfavorable things, what we like, what we don't like. And as we said, sometimes we just don't know enough about things to form an attitude. You can come back and watch a little bit of that if you need to as well. Yeezy, I found the best thing for Yeezy is, depending on your attitude towards him, he reflects his attitude back to you, from positive to negative, to maybe a bit of neutral in the middle there. All right, so yeah, as we said, all of our psychology, so attitudes aren't just purely about cognition. Attitudes are also about, there's an affective component as well, but also then our attitudes lead us to behave in ways that reflect those attitudes as well. And I use the example of a spider. We have lots of beliefs about, anyone not like spiders? We've done plenty of spider stuff. Yeah, some people have positive attitudes to spiders. Some people have negative attitudes towards spiders. I like spiders. I like seeing them in my backyard because I know they're going to kill the mosquitoes. Some people have other attitudes as well. So read the textbook on that to know a little bit about that. I don't know if I ask you anything. I sometimes ask a question on particularly attitudes and opinions and values. Attitudes are more specific. Opinions are attitudes, but just a verbal expression of an attitude. If you don't, you can express your attitudes as an opinion, but you can still hold attitudes without expressing them to anyone as well. Values are important too. I talked a little bit about it yesterday. They're more broader things rather than focusing on specific objects or events. Things that are important to us. You know, I value being honest or kind to others, value success. If you're a Kardashian, you value fame and fortune over other sorts of things, values, all that sort of stuff. I won't go into too much detail on that. But what I do want to focus on a little bit is how we actually form attitudes. Yeah. I showed you those things. Josh got a little bit upset with Zubat being on the negative side. Game of Thrones might not be on the positive. The interesting thing about attitudes is everyone has different attitudes, different combinations of attitudes, different levels of affect and cognition, behavior towards them. How many people have stopped and thought about, well, why do I like certain things? Why did I like or not like Game of Thrones? Yeah. Why do I like or not like sports or particular sorts of movies or foods? How does that actually come about? How do we actually form our attitudes? Has anyone actually thought about that? Something that crosses your mind? Usually it's not something you worry too much about.
So like, I really hate this team that my grandparents used to go for.
Sorry?
I really hate this this team that plays footy.
Oh, okay.
It's, you know, because my grandparents went for them, and
Oh, okay.
they were basically like bullying me with them. So like, that's why I hate them. You know, an emotion associated with it.
Yeah, previous experience. So let's go through a few of these. Previous experience is something. So obviously, yeah, if you've got a previous experience, that one's a little bit more in terms of learning, reinforcement, and punishment that you just mentioned. But just what we call the mere exposure effect, just being exposed to something tends to give us a more favorable attitude towards it. And again, there's some really interesting things. In 1001, we talk about some of the subconscious influences and things like that. But if you put an ad on TV, you don't pay attention to it, but it's an ad for a box of cereal or something. If you put someone in an aisle, the cereal aisle in the shopping centre, and just say, just pick a random box of cereal, they're more likely to pick something that they've seen before than something that they haven't seen before. And again, it might tap into some of that, our perspectives that we've been going through right throughout the semester. Bit of an evolutionary thing, right? If it's something that I've seen before, I'm still alive, therefore that's probably safe. So I probably like that thing because it's not going to kill me. Whereas if it's something that's I haven't seen before, then, well, I'm not sure about this thing. Is it a potential threat? Could it be harmful to me? So there's maybe a little bit of that going on as well. I'm not saying that that's a conscious thing, that you have, your cereal selection is fear-based or anything like that, based on threatening, but that's kind of the way our evolutionary brains work a little bit as well. And there's lots of stories for that. Yeah, I use that example, pigeons or magpies and things like that. Magpie season at the moment. Sometimes early childhood experience. I've got a bit of an issue with magpies. The interesting thing, and I've got the caption there, is you don't have to have a direct experience with something to form an attitude on it. Sometimes if you actually watch somebody else's experience, you see something on the news, on TV, that can shape your attitude as well. How safe would you rate it to go and swim in the ocean? Who would say it's pretty safe?
Extremely safe.
Yeah. Who would probably be a little bit wary?
Not after that guy at Greenbelt the other day.
I grew up. I was a lifesaver at Greenmount Surf Club all my life. I don't think there's ever been anything happen there. We barely even did a rescue. That was tragic. I know the lifesavers down there were on at that time, but that would shape our attitudes a little bit, right? Not something we've experienced directly, but that's something you could be wary. Social media, I talked about yesterday. I asked the question, is the world safer now than it was 10 or 20 years ago? Is there more crime, more violence? If I ask people, and the research suggests that people are more likely to say, yes, it's much more violence, much more crime today than there was 20 years ago, the actual statistics don't back that up as much. And again, part of that's due to the way our cognition works, which is the second part of the lecture, and the way that we use what we call heuristics as well. All right, so the next couple of things are all about learning. So we actually learn attitudes, or three things essentially are learning. And this is something, again, we focus on in 1001. If you're a psych student, you're going to do this with me. The first type of learning is called operant conditioning. And it's essentially, learning by punishment and reinforcement. So this is, you might have an attitude that's valued or not valued. Was that Josh, your example of the footy team? Who gave the footy team example?
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, and again, so it doesn't have to be like a physical reward or punishment, but if it just annoyed you, then basically, that was sort of, in a sense, every time that was mentioned a negative experience, that lent you to learn it. Were you going to say what the team is, or were you going to relate it? Did you listen to the lecture capture?
No, I did not.
Oh, that's all right. I talked about being a Manly supporter. I thought maybe that's the team that you have a bad attitude towards. And I told the story of when my parents moved up from Sydney. I was from near Manly in Sydney, and I had my little Manly gear on when I was about 5 years old. The fruit shop owner was an ex-Manly player when we moved up to the Gold Coast, and he saw my Manly gear and gave me a free toffee apple. And every time I went in the shop, he gave me a free toffee apple. So I'm a pretty die-hard Manly supporter now, even though that's probably a really unpopular attitude to hold, or particularly to tell people about, because we're such a hated team. But it got reinforced through this operant conditioning very early on in my childhood. Sometimes it's hard to unlearn those associations. The other one, and this is usually well known of, who's heard of Pavlov's dog? Yeah, operant conditioning is about rewards and punishment. It's usually a voluntary thing. So there's a sense of choice in our decision-making for those attitudes. Classical conditioning is a bit more involuntary. It's sometimes called reflexive learning or Pavlovian conditioning. And it came from a famous experiment by a physiologist called Ivan Pavlov, who actually was studying the digestive systems of dogs. He was actually using meat powder to make these dogs salivate so he could, record how much saliva they produced and things like that in their digestion. But he noticed that before he even came in and gave the dogs the meat powder to start them salivating, the click of the footsteps, and eventually when he did the conditioning stuff, if he could ring a bell at the same time that he presented the meat powder, then even if he didn't have the meat powder anymore, the dogs would salivate just to the bell. So this is called, a classical conditioning, learning by association. So in other words, for this dog, just by these stimuli being paired together, there was an unconditioned stimuli, which was the meat powder, which, you just salivate to normally, but you could condition that bell to be actually the same response as the meat powder through association. Advertisers use this all the time. So anytime you get advertising, like I said in the learning capture, nobody comes in, and gives you $50 if you pick the Pepsi over the Coke, or no one sits there leaning on the aisle with a baseball bat, threatening you not to pick up, the Pepsi or not to pick up the Coke. Buy the right one, make the right choice. It's usually about classical conditioning. We have these associations. That's why celebrities get paid lots of money, right? And we'll talk about that with some of the attitude stuff a little bit later on. Another one I might ask about is what we call the spreading attitude effect that works through classical conditioning. This is something that happens quite a bit. So it's kind of like a ripple effect by a classical conditioning or association. I know Beyonce makes me really happy when I see her. So I really like Beyonce. I don't know who this dude is, but Beyonce seems to like him. So I guess he's okay too. I have a favorable attitude. Then there's this other dude that seems to be associated with both of those people. Well, I guess I like Beyonce, so he must be all right. So he must be all right. Lots of things, and people use that. Advertisers use a bit of this stuff as well. Social interactions, another one, advertising, word of mouth, all those sorts of things as well. Another type of learning is called modeling or observational learning. So a lot of times we don't form our attitudes with traditional types of rewards and punishment or conditioning. We actually learn it by copying other people. Usually most children adopt the attitudes that their parents do. Then there's usually a process of going complete polar opposite to their parents and maybe being a lot more influenced by their peers. Being developing their own attitudes toward things as well. Self-perception, so sometimes, like we said in the emotion lecture, sometimes, if you smile, it can make you happy. There's a sort of a bi-directional link. Same sort of thing as well. Sometimes our attitudes influence our behavior, but sometimes our behavior influences our attitude. We behave in a certain way, and then it sort of makes us change our cognition. That overlaps a little bit with cognitive dissonance, which is one of the really important topics I'm going to get up to. So here's an important part, as we said before, if we know that people have different attitudes, lots of stuff in life is about changing people's attitudes. Who's on the psych stream? I'm going to be using some of this social psychology to make you love statistics. If you're on the psychology stream with me when you do 1003 with me, might be a hard sell, but we'll see what we can do with it as well. Might have to bring Beyonce in to even have any hope, right? Or Brad Pitt or someone. Lots of situations where we want to change attitudes. Elections coming up, all sorts of things. Health behaviors, when we talk about those health behavior models, a lot of those were really about attitude changes, making you have a less favorable attitude towards unhealthy behaviors, more positive attitude to healthy behaviors as well. So there's lots of reasons. As I said, elections, sometimes it's not about making the person like you. In elections, it's usually trying to make the other person or make you not like the other person so much that you don't want to vote for them. Does that make sense? Australia's a little bit easier to predict elections than the US, because because voting is not compulsory, you might completely hate somebody, but if you couldn't be bothered even going to vote against them, then the other person still might get in. Whereas in Australia, because it's compulsory to vote, not liking someone is probably even more important factor as well. I showed this in class. I might play this again really quickly. This was a nice example by I think it was Victorian Road Traffic Authority about 10 years ago. So some of you might have remembered that when you were kids, just as a way of changing attitudes. I'll play this really quickly. Anyone seen that one before? Anyone like that ad?
I remember it.
Remember it? So of our perspectives we've been talking about at this right from week 1 in personality, what perspective might explain some of the subtext in that ad? We talked about it, we had a bit of fun with it. No, not cognitive or behavioral. Definitely doesn't look like humanistic. What were some of the other ones we looked at?
Psychodynamic.
Yeah, anyone think Freudian? Yeah, what's the best way to actually try and change attitudes and behavior, you know, question somebody's manhood, particularly for males as well. All right, so here's one I do want you to know. We'll go through this quickly, but this is something that I want you to do a little bit more homework on. It's a little bit different to the textbook, but textbook does talk overlaps with this, but there's a Yale model. It's been a little bit outdated, but I'm going to stick with this one. Know this Yale model because this is something that is a possible short answer question for the final exam. Specifically, know what the 4 factors are that are shown to influence attitude change. And for each one, we'll go through these in a sec. For each one of these, know some of the conditions in each of those 4 factors that might increase or decrease the likelihood that somebody's attitude would change, either favorably or unfavorably. And maybe think of ways that you could actually apply this to changing attitudes. So if it was a health, psychology, behavior, anyone notice anything in society where maybe some behavior change is in order? Anything you want to have any influence over?
Wearing masks.
Wearing masks is probably a really good one, right? And that was one, and we've talked about that before. I was still struggling to get my head around the psychology behind why mask wearing is, you know, out of all the things, you know, wearing clothes, speeding, wearing seatbelts, all the thousands of laws that we follow, why the mask one seems to create so much psychological distress to people. Yeah, how would we use some of this information? So you want to do an ad campaign for mask wearing. What sorts of things could you take into account? And again, the idea of this, really applying it, is to change either your own attitudes towards something, to shape other people's attitudes more positively, you know, as a social worker, as a psychologist. What are some of the things we need to be aware of that might influence as well? 2 important things that I talk about that I might actually ask you about specifically are attractiveness and fear. So definitely know also how attractiveness and fear influence attitude change as well. Like I said, I'll skip over these pretty quickly, but you can go back and have a look at a few of these things as well in the lecture capture I read in the book. One of the key ones for the recipient or the audience, so who we're trying to change the attitude of, the target is intelligence. And we know that more intelligent people are less likely to be influenced for attitude changes. in certain circumstances. There is a little bit of mixed results to that. I know when you look at US politics, Australian use it a little bit too. There's a euphemistic term called low information voters, and targeting ad campaigns to what they call low information voters. What does
Is that how Trump
suggest?
got in?
Sorry?
Is that how Trump got in?
Oh, I'm not too sure. No comment. But sometimes, yeah, for the people that sort of, and it's real when they say low information, it's probably not necessarily unintelligent people, but it could be people that just don't have an interest in it. So they might be sort of fairly intelligent, but just have no interest. They don't know anything about policies that people propose or anything like that. So that sort of stuff can influence our attitude change a little bit as well. Pre-existing attitude strength is a really, really important one. You know, if someone's got rusted on pre-existing attitudes, it's very, very hard to change. If Trump gets back in, that would probably be something that would be a key part. His audience, his recipients of his message, some of those pretty much, their attitudes won't change no matter what. You know, so it wouldn't matter what he said or did. You know, attitudes would stay the same as well. The second component is the source of the message. So who's actually communicating the message? So not only do we need to know about whose attitude we're trying to change, but who's trying to change the attitude. There's some important factors there. Similarity is one of the important ones. And for the people, there's a few people who haven't watched this. So I gave the example. Is anyone, any Yeezy fans here at all? Anyone? Imagine if you like Yeezy, I like Freddie. Yeah. And as a Yeezy fan, you come to me and you want to say, I want you to listen to this music. It's going to be fantastic. You'll love it. How likely am I to change my attitude? And as I said, I'm probably not likely to change it because of our dissimilarities, because you like Yeezy and I like people that can sing. But a lot of people use that stuff, right? Politicians use it all the time. It was just jokes, people, by the way. You know, I'm just like you. A lot of the thing, if the communicator kind of says, you know, I'm just similar to you, we've got the same beliefs, same attitudes, etc., etc. That has a big influence on it as well. When you're trying to be relatable, that's something too. And again, this is sort of not just, you know, from how to trying to sell someone and manipulate people. If you're working as a social worker, you're working as a psychologist, you know, in a sense, that's really what empathy is about. Being relatable to somebody, you know, having that, being able to experience something and having been that, you know, able to, you know, relate to somebody is a really important process as well. Credibility is important. You know, you've got expertise, trustworthiness, not so much these days, right? Science is optional. You don't have to trust scientists anymore. There's other people, there's YouTubes that are much better than science in explaining the way the world works. Attractiveness is a little bit complex. The tendency is that, yeah, we do get persuaded a little bit if the communicator is attractive, but there is a second side of that in a second. The third factor in the model is the message itself, which is interesting. And this is something where people go wrong. If somebody's very well informed, they know their topic, they know, you know, about what you're trying to change attitudes about, trying to sell them on whatever your viewpoint is to change their attitudes is not very effective. The best thing you can do is actually give them both sides of the argument. Maybe you want to give the side that's not yours a little bit weaker argument than someone else might, and then give yours. But having a two-sided argument actually is much more likely to change someone that's intelligent and informed in their attitudes as well. Fear, again, tends to be effective, but there's only certain circumstances as well for it. And then that fourth one really quickly, the message is important too. How you transmit the message. If it's something pretty complicated, obviously you've got to explain it, maybe visually written down. But if it's a pretty simple message, you know, all the audio visual stuff as well, you know, and you can look at things like TV ads or radio ads or, you know, print ads, how effective they are as well. There's lots of things. I use the example. Not many people had this when I did this in the lecture. How many people's dentists have like a chart like that where it actually shows them, you know, how much sugar is in actually all these
My
different
dentist
things?
doesn't, but my nurse's room and my doctor's surgery does.
Yeah, and
So when you take
sometimes
your
the
kids in there, they're all there.
health places or gyms or something have those 1 kilo block, those yellow rubber blocks of fat. And they say if you've got 5 kilos, here's these 5 big blocks to kind of visually show you, you know, this sort of stuff as well. Some of those things work really well. Yeah, and again, obviously, what is it? TikTok and Instagram. That's usually how I communicate with my kids, even if they're in their rooms in the house. I don't ring the kids anymore, or if I've got a kid in the car with me, I'll say, can you message through Instagram or something, DM my child, and they'll respond to that quicker than they'll answer a phone or do anything else these days as well. All right, just coming back to attractiveness. One of the key things for the attractiveness, and you can go through this example, this was basically using this fake product, trying to get you to change your attitudes towards Savage Tan, using either an unattractive communicator or an attractive communicator. That wasn't the images they used, obviously. But here's the thing they manipulated, and this was the key factor in whether attractiveness worked or not. Was the message strong or was it weak? So what was a clear, direct message? You know, hats sometimes give you a bit of shade, and maybe that might help a little bit of sun damage. That's a pretty weak message. Put on a hat when you go outside or you'll die of cancer is probably a bit more of a stronger message. Not that you'd actually do that because that comes into fear a little bit as well. But yeah, strong message and attractiveness, I'll show you the end results of that, does seem to work. So that was the key. And it's something that I might ask in the exam on this. So yeah, basically, if you look at the blue bars where the message was strong, and on this axis is attitudes towards the sunscreen, the higher score means more favorable attitude. So those two blue bars, you can see pretty clearly the attractive is much higher than the unattractive for the strong message. But if it was a weak message, which is the red bars here, there was pretty much no difference at all between attractive or unattractive. Advertisers ruin millions of dollars in celebrity endorsements sometimes on that because they pay all this money to a celebrity, and they spend all their budget on the celebrity, and then it's a weak ad, it's a weak message, and they don't get any benefit out of it as well. So if you get into advertising, that's what we do. I think I said J.B. Watson, one of the founders of behavioral psychology, that behavioral perspective we talked about, he actually started in psychology, but ended up moving to New York, and he was an advertising executive and made squillions more than psychologists ever do in advertising. Yeah, so that's attractiveness. Yes, yeah. So just to reinforce that again. Yeah, you're more persuaded by a presenter in an advertisement if it's a strong message, if they're attractive, than if it's a weak message. When it comes to fear, there is a bit of an exception to it. I'll play you an ad. A lot of people hadn't seen this one before. People yesterday refused to believe this was actually an ad on TV, but this was an ad from HIV/AIDS 30 years ago. So I remember when I was a kid sitting down to dinner, having dinner and sitting down in front of the TV at 7 o'clock at night, and this ad came on TV, and I still have this visceral response to it because I remember it. So it was at least 30 years ago, but it was part of a national campaign against AIDS, which at the time, there was no drug treatments and things like that. But if you haven't seen this, just have a quick look and tell me what you think.
Good morning.
Get it going. Sorry.
There's no sound for it.
Oh, isn't there? Sorry. I'll come back. Thank you. What's happening?
I just love the voiceover in it.
Yeah, sorry. Here we go. Let's try again. Is that better? Yes, no?
Yeah.
At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it. The fact is, over 50,000 men, women, and children now carry the AIDS virus. That in 3 years, nearly 2,000 of us will be dead. That if not stopped, it could kill more Australians than World War II. But AIDS can be stopped, and you can help stop it. If you have sex, have just one safe partner, or always use condoms. Always.
Always great to reminisce about childhood memories, right? Yeah, any comments on that for the people who hadn't seen that before? Who hadn't seen it? So that was legitimately, that was a, you know,
I hadn't seen it before.
never
I
seen
have
it.
seen it, but I don't know where I've seen it because I'm only 26. But I have seen it
Yeah.
before.
It might have just been in a, like, shows about it,
It's
or
probably in school.
Yeah, I had to watch it in school.
had to watch it at school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that picking up that spare was pretty brutal, right? I just when I see that, I remember as a kid watching that baby when the Reaper picked up the spare, just flipping up into the air and just, you know what I mean? I had no conception of it at that age of, you know, yeah. And again, so was it effective? Well, it's pretty hard to tell, right? You can't really experiment on giving people AIDS or not, or you know, manipulating that sort of stuff. But it did seem to have a good pickup after that. So the basis of that, and there was another little study I talked about before where counterintuitively seeing something fearful, this is what's going to happen if you don't floss your teeth, versus if you floss your teeth, you know, your teeth are going to look nice. The fear didn't work in this one. And the reason it didn't work in this one, and maybe why it works so well in the Grim Reaper ads, was there was no information given other than the photos in this experiment. And from some of that health psychology stuff we did 2 weeks ago, the key, and again, obviously know this stuff, the key from all the research said fear works well, but it only works well if there's instructions on how to reduce fear. And again, some people have found that maybe that isn't the case. And again, there's some research that suggests what we call this inverted U curve, that a lot of things work as well. Fear works up to a point. But even with instructions, if something is just too fearful, you sometimes will just scare people to death, paralyze people, and they won't change their behavior or attitudes at all. That works for a lot of stuff. I talked about yesterday things about anxiety and exam performance. Sports psychologists use the same thing. There's a certain level of arousal getting pumped up that's good, but you can get over aroused and actually decrease the performance, or you can be under aroused, you know, so you're not pumped up enough. So getting nervous for an exam is a good thing because it actually gives you a little bit more energy, it gets a bit of blood pumping, you know, but too much obviously is not a good thing. There's kind of a sweet spot to it. Behavior did change. We don't know as a result of the campaign or other sorts of things as well. All right, there might be a question or two on the ELM, elaboration likelihood model. Nice, simple model, and this is pretty easy to work out. There's basically two pathways, and there is some actual neurological research with brain scanning and stuff like that that suggests there's actually some biological differences in the way our thoughts work between the central root. So the central root basically is when you change your attitude towards an issue based on the quality of the message itself, rather than any of those emotional contents and things like that. So fear and attractiveness, none of those things work. Whereas the peripheral root is basically when you change your attitudes towards an issue based on the emotional content. So you might be in a good mood, maybe you're busy, maybe it's just like, who cares? It's not a really meaningful decision. All of those things usually use the peripheral route. So there's an important difference there. And anytime you make a major decision in your life, usually what you're going to do, if you're going to buy a house or a car or decide, you know what, I'm going to go to Griffith College and study, you would assume wouldn't be just a spur of the moment thing. How attractive the person on the Griffith College ad, that sort of stuff isn't going to sway you. It's more about making a pretty, concerted decision-making process, weighing up all the pros and cons, etc. But we can't make those decisions every day. You don't look at and just agonize, over absolutely every single thing you do. Do I put 1 sugar or 2 sugars in my coffee? Let's have a look at it. I better go up. I'll look on the website. What's the calorie count for sugar? Let's do some nutritional analysis. I'll work out what my calorie expenditure is. You just pick stuff. That's where you're more likely to get influenced with the peripheral route stuff. So most of our decision making is peripheral route as well. Some other things, I might ask you a question on the LaPierre study, which is a really interesting study, and it's going into this cognitive dissonance, which is a really important concept. And again, this is maybe more relevant these days as well. This was back 80 years plus ago, before World War II, where there was a lot of anti-Asian sentiment in the US. So, were Americans racist towards any Asian countries? Well, they thought maybe we'll test it. Let's see if there is any racist behavior. So they basically had an Asian couple travel to 251 hotels and restaurants across the US. Out of those 251, only 1 refused service. So is that pretty strong evidence that there was no racism in the US? Seems pretty strong, right, in terms of behavior. But then when they followed up, they actually sent letters to all the establishments just to ask what their attitudes were. And they surveyed it. Only about half of them actually responded. But of the ones that responded, 92% said, no, we wouldn't. So in other words, when we asked, these businesses were asked, at a distance anonymously, 92% of them showed racist attitudes, even though there didn't seem to be any evidence of racist behavior. So could we say there's no racism? Well, if there's still a huge amount of racist attitudes, obviously this racism exists. It might not manifest in that particular situation. People might not want to express those racist attitudes in their behaviors as well. And you can see that a lot these days when people talk about, just observationally based on behavior and things like that, saying, well, there's no racism in Australia, or there's no racism, in other countries in the world. It's not as simple as saying, well, if people, we'd see more obvious behavioral differences as well. So the key take home from this research and where it links into is this notion of people's attitudes are sometimes really, really inconsistent with their behavior, which is the key thing to remember out of that research as well. So yeah, why are people's attitudes and behavior different? Well, there's a whole stack of stuff. Specificity is important. If we're measuring an attitude, it's got to be to a very specific behavior. Sometimes we just have habits, we know things are bad for us, but just out of habit, we do them. Sometimes it's social pressure and conformity, something we're going to talk about next week, that really influences our behavior. So yeah, we actually sort of conform just to fit in with people. Sometimes it's things that we have control. This taps into that stuff we talked about in the health psychology, perceived behavioral control. Sometimes if it's perceived behavioral control is low, maybe that increases the gap between our attitudes and behavior. Sometimes it's just competing attitudes, which you'd expect is probably one of the things in the LaPierre study. Yes, I have negative attitudes. I've got racist attitudes, but my positive attitude towards money, someone spending it when they've got the cash there right in front of me to spend in my business, that positive attitude to money trumps, it outweighs the negative attitudes, the racist attitudes as well. Yeah. All right. So this leads into, as I said, one of the most important concepts. This is something that you should be aware of. This is something that you will have experienced your entire lives. You may not have put a psychological term like cognitive dissonance on it. Who's heard the term cognitive dissonance before this class? Anyone heard that term before? But yeah, essentially know what it is, which is basically an inconsistency between our cognitions, our thoughts, and our behaviors. And what happens with that, it results in what we call an aversive psychological state. It makes us feel bad. Who's ever said something they regretted and felt a bit anxious, felt a bit sick in the stomach, or got angry at someone that you've said, you know, this person's a hypocrite. They say something, but they do something else. All of that really taps into this concept of cognitive dissonance. So this is, I talked about the, what did I say might be another short answer question? Priming here. Someone help me out. I've forgotten. I guess it doesn't matter.
The Yale model?
The Yale model, that was it. Knowing those 4 factors, how they shape attitudes. I definitely know what cognitive dissonance is. I definitely know about Festinger and Carl Smith's knob turning study and how it explained cognitive dissonance. And also what I'd really like you to do, if you got this one, would be come up with an example from your own life of cognitive dissonance and look at what sorts of things you could do to overcome that cognitive dissonance. And it doesn't necessarily have to be good things or bad things. Yeah. So the key thing is this inconsistency between, as I said, our thoughts, our behaviors, or it might be between 2 cognitions or between 2 behaviors. So what do we do when there's something that we've got cognitive dissonance with? Yeah. Who considers themselves to be intelligent and smart? Anyone here? Hopefully most of you. You're doing tertiary education. Who hasn't finished the assignment?
Me.
Is there any anxiety? Remember, we've been working on this for weeks and weeks and weeks. Anyone got a little
Not
bit of
really,
anxiety?
because I've only got half the discussion and then the abstract to go.
Because you want to do well, right?
I want to pass.
You've got a positive attitude towards getting through and getting this course and not wasting your money. If your behavior is not matching that at the moment because you haven't finished your assignment like you should have done already by now, so you can get some feedback, does that create any aversive psychological state, a little bit of anxiety, maybe a little bit of stress?
For me, not a
No?
little bit. I've been sick,
Okay.
like really sick the last couple of days, so I haven't really thought about much except waiting for my COVID results.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You're overcoming cognitive dissonance. How would you be doing that? Changing some of the cognitions, your explanation. Anyone rationalize it? I have been a bit sick, so that's okay. That's why my behavior hasn't matched my attitudes. Is that right?
Okay.
So you can sometimes change your cognitions, your attitudes towards something.
Feeling sorry for yourself
you could change your behavior, right? And you could go, right, I'm going to get in right from the start and work on my assignment really hard. And that would get rid of that stress of not doing my assignment, because then I'd finish it and the stress would be gone. Maybe you could reduce the importance of those cognitions or behaviors and go, you know what, as long as I pass, I'm okay. I don't have to do well in it. Yeah. Or you could maybe change, you know, go, oh, well, I'll just do a little bit now, you know, to reduce the, you know, change the behavior a little bit. You get the idea with that, right? So read up on that. There's plenty of stuff in the textbook. I talk about that a little bit more in the learning content. But just to go through this study that I might ask you about, this was a really, really interesting study going back quite a while ago now. You went into the exam, you went into the experiment, and basically you were told that we're actually measuring your knob turning performance. So we're going to watch this, we're going to record this, and we're going to observe how well you turn these knobs 90 degrees clockwise. And people did this for an hour. Who thinks that's a pretty good experiment? So yeah, these people think they're being rated. So what are they trying to manipulate here? A pretty boring task, right? So the idea is to pretty much bore this person to death for an hour. Then where the independent variable came in and what the true dependent variable was actually their self-report of did they enjoy it. So if I made you turn knobs for an hour and I said, did you enjoy it? Was that fun? What would you probably say?
No.
No, that was horrible. That's an hour of my life I'll never get back. A third of the participants were basically just told to leave and they didn't get told anything. And then on the way out, they said, look, how much did you enjoy it? And they said, no, not at all. But a third of the people were actually saying, look, there's people in the waiting room. I'll give you $20 to tell those people that actually it was pretty fun and pretty interesting. Yeah. Would you do that for $20? This is back in 1959. So what would that be equivalent to? Probably $100 or something by now. Would you do that? Yeah. Another group of people were actually just given $1 and said, oh, here's $1. Just tell this person the task is fun. So we manipulated 3 different levels of that variable. But then what we did is whatever the situation was, where they just walked out, where they got paid $20 to lie to someone or $1 to lie to someone, the DV was, how much did you enjoy the task? So people actually had to rate how much they enjoyed it. So this is the enjoyability of the task, sort of positive or negative. As you'd expect, the control group rated as negative. We didn't like it. It was boring. But the interesting thing is the people that were paid $1 actually rated the task, you know, just personally, whatever we told you to do aside, did you enjoy doing it? The people in the dollar condition actually rated the task as much more enjoyable. The people who got paid $20 didn't really rate as enjoyable. They were much closer to the people that said it was boring. So why would that be? Well, in the control group, it's pretty easy, right? They just got this boring task. They asked him how much do you enjoy it, and they said, yeah, it was terrible. There's no dissonance there. Their attitudes are consistent with their behavior. It was boring. I thought it was boring, and I'm going to tell people it's boring. In the $20 situation, yeah, if I said that and I said, you know, did you enjoy the task? Well, you've lied to somebody and told them it's fun when it's not. Yeah, so there should be some dissonance there, but is it high dissonance? How do you justify lying to that person?
I got paid to do it.
I got $20, right? Yeah, so that's fine. You know what I mean? Yes, I did. I got paid $20. It's only an experiment. So that's actually a low dissonance situation. Whereas in the dollar condition, you couldn't really have that same justification. You couldn't go, oh, well, I lied to that person because I got paid $1. If I said, I'll give you $1 to do something, would you do it? So the problem with that is they couldn't really justify changing their behavior of $1. So that actually, there was high dissonance there. Obviously, you couldn't change your behavior because you've already lied to the person. But what you could do is change your attitudes towards the task, which is why that's what they did. Yeah. I told someone it was not fun. I told someone it was fun. I've gotten real no justification for lying to that person. But you know what? It wasn't actually, it was kind of fun. So they kind of make their attitudes, their expressed attitudes line up a little bit more with what they behave like. Does it make sense? You do that all the time. My good example is I teach statistics. Who loves statistics and maths? Anyone?
You know I hate it, Tony.
I'm in the dollar condition, right? But would you spend your life in a career that you hated? Something that was really boring? Probably not. So, but it pays okay. So what happens? What's the other way you get around that aversive state of doing something like boring like stats? Well, you know what? It's not that boring, right? There are some interesting parts to it. You know, so that's my career in statistics has been a 20-year journey of minimizing cognitive dissonance. So I actually enjoy stats and love it now. Not because probably I technically did, but it's the only way that I can actually justify and reduce that cognitive dissonance of doing something that's so boring. You get the idea with that, right? All right, let's get through some of the other stuff. So social cognition, there's a few key things I want you to talk about. Schemas, we talked about, you know, those notion of schemas and schema formation, assimilation, accommodation, developmental psychology. That still improves. Our schemas are still there in adulthood. They just get more complex. And we have schemas for people and events and roles and all those things. You can read about that. But what I want to focus on is a couple of quick things. One is impression formation. So yeah, there's a really interesting lot of stuff to read about how we actually make, you know, information. That person's a nice person. I don't like that person. How do we form schemas about people we haven't met yet or are just about to meet initially is what we're about. Two key things for that. So know the basics of impression formation, and the key basics you need to remember for this. First impressions, the old saying, does really count. So impression formation is very, very important initially. And the research says, yeah, first impressions do count. First impressions can have very powerful effects because what they do, they create mental representations that influence the schema of somebody, and those schemas then influence the way that they process all the subsequent information. So if you get some, you know, some positive first impression, that can then make you interpret the exact same neutral information much more positively later on as well. So that's the key thing. But the other thing is, from an evolutionary perspective, anything that's potentially threatening to us brings our radar up a little bit as well. So the other side of that is if we're forming an impression, yes, we tend to pay attention to more information that's presented first, but negativity is important too. So if there's any information that's negative, we definitely pay more attention to that than the positive information. So kind of we have a bias towards first impressions, but we also have a bit of a bias towards negative information, threatening information as well. Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about is the way that our cognition works when we're making decisions and judgments and things like that. And I used this one before, just to skip over, you know, what's more likely to kill us, a cow or a shark? And they're probably asking this question a couple of days on from a tragedies. Not timely, but it's probably an appropriate thing to look at. Who would say shark?
Isn't it cows?
Yeah, who would say kind of, I think shark, so I'll say the opposite because Tony's probably trying to trick me. Yeah, if you look at the statistics on it, horses are the real deadly ones. Don't mess around with horses. I've got a justified phobia of horses. Cows are twice as likely to kill us as sharks, but the heuristic, the mental shortcuts we use, one of them is called the availability heuristic. So when we're estimating the likelihood of something happening, the ease that we can bring it to mind, the easier it is to visualize and potentially more threatening it is, the more likely we are to overestimate that occurrence. Yeah, like I said, if I asked you to estimate the occurrence of getting attacked by a shark, you know, most people at the moment might say that's really, really high, despite the fact that driving to the beach to go for a surf is still imminently more deadly than actually, you know, being out in the water and having a surf. But our heuristics, our cognition don't work that way. The other one, just quickly, which lotto numbers would you play? I've got a couple of examples of each, so you can go back and look at this if you haven't watched the learning content. Who's going to play the top line of numbers? Who's going to play the bottom line? How many people would pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the Oz Lotto? Which one's more likely to come up? Intuitively, who would go for the top one?
Me.
Because you think that looks like a random sort of lotto draw. Because has anyone seen a lotto draw that's come up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Yeah. Well, has anyone seen a lotto draw that's come up exactly 2, 7, 13, 18, 21, 23, 35? Both of those statistically are equally likely outcomes, but we tend to overestimate or underestimate the true probabilities. It's called a base rate fallacy sometimes. So yeah, for the representative heuristic, when we're looking at the likelihood a person belongs to a specific group based on their characteristics rather than so the statistical base rate chance of group membership and things like that. So that's a really important one as well. So know the availability heuristic, know the representative heuristic, and I guess knowing the difference. The other one in terms of heuristics and shortcuts, I joked about yesterday, could be the most damaging bias in society right now. and might lead to the end of civilization through a world war or something, is this notion of what we call confirmation bias. Who's heard of confirmation bias at all? Anyone heard of that? Anyone anti-vaxxers, maybe mask wearing, any government conspiracists? Confirmation bias is basically this notion of whatever our beliefs, whatever our schemas are, we basically, anything that confirms or support those, we actually take on and we listen to, we pay attention to. Anything that's inconsistent with our beliefs and schemas, we just ignore. It's all fake news, right? This is a really, really important thing. And I talked about, I think I mentioned before earlier, a few weeks ago, that Facebook, the social media, Google actually have algorithms basically that actually support what you're interested in. And there's reasons they do that, but inadvertently, they basically, the algorithms make you a victim of your own biases. So in other words, yeah, if you've got a particular bias, you search stuff up, something you like, got a positive attitude towards, whether it's good things or bad things, racist behaviors, then basically those social media will then basically feed that bias and not show you anything that's inconsistent with it, and will start giving you all the consistent stuff, which can lead to a lot of, really negative social consequences as well.
Mum's group on Facebook. The worst.
Mums groups?
Yeah, on Facebook. Terrible.
Yeah, in terms of?
With the like people who don't believe in vaccinations, they'll just Google it and then that's it.
Yeah, and you get those things like that debunked Andrew Wakefield study from years ago, that, that paper that was the only paper that's been published on autism and vaccinations.
And he had to retract it. And he couldn't practice anymore.
Yeah. And the problem is, at the time, it's a correlation causation we talked about in our assignment. The time that when babies are born, you don't necessarily notice these sorts of things. So at the time where the symptoms of autism start to be actually perceivable and noticeable, and you think, hang on, something's not quite right there, tend to be around the same age times as vaccination schedules. Yeah, so this is sort of a correlation thing as well. And it's sort of, you learn by association. You could also say that wearing shoes probably is a cause of autism. If anyone knows that, maybe I'll publish a study on it, because it seems to be when kids start wearing shoes, I've noticed that when my child started putting shoes on rather than just having, socks or bare feet or something, they started developing symptoms of it. It's the same thing, obviously. It's just linked to particular developmental milestones that lines up with vaccine schedules and things like that. And as I said, people go, oh, that's crap. There's this and this. You know what I mean? It's a tough thing to get good science, good information out these days. Yeah. And again, it's not ones, and scientists will never say with 100% certainty that this does or doesn't. We never know with certainty, but what they'll say is, on the available evidence, there's no justification for this, or there is some justification for that. Hopefully that's how we work a little bit as well. All right. One of the last things I want to cover, and again, this is good from obviously a professional perspective if you're in health sciences, but definitely from a personal perspective as well, is what we talk about as attribution theory. How do we actually attribute, how do we make judgments and decisions, even about ourselves or about other people as well? And I used that example yesterday. Has anyone been cut off in traffic recently? Someone just did something like crazy on the road in front of them, almost had an accident. I talked about this in the lecture. What do you do if someone just almost sideswipes you, cuts you off in front of you? What's your attributions you make about that person? You're probably like me,
Not
right?
a good person.
Yeah, I had that actually happen to me. A person just didn't see me. I was just right next to them. I wasn't even in the blind spot. I was actually side by side, and a car just swerved just into the other lane because they wanted to turn and didn't see me and ran me off the road. And I literally had to brake and slide just off into the side lane to avoid them sideswiping me. So the first thing I did obviously was say, gee, I'm worried about that person. They've obviously got a lot of stress in their life. They must have had a lot of distractions that they didn't notice my car. I hope they're okay. That's a reasonable assumption, right?
No.
No?
Most people worry about themselves.
Are you one of those
first.
people that probably honk your horn or get angry and upset about it? Or?
I would honk my horn, maybe. It depends. Because, yeah.
Actually, you've got to be careful about being aggressive now, right? Because you can get yourself
Exactly.
in all sorts of road rage situations. Yeah, so we can attribute things to what we call internal dispositional factors. You know, it's about the person, their personality. Or we could talk about an external situational. It's the environment, the context as well. So they're the two attributions. If we're deciding on, you know, this attribution, we can go through, and I won't talk about this now, but you can come back and have a look at it because I might ask a question on it. Kelly's covariation principle says, you know, well, was it the person that's in the wrong? Maybe was that me, who was there as well? And again, there'll be a question identifying this. And by the way, there's some questions in the weekly quizzes to go back and practice this for yourself. If it's low consistency, you know, that person, that's the first time they've ever cut someone off in traffic. Maybe that was just a situational thing. It was just a one-off thing. Yeah. If it's high consistency, you know, that happens all the time. Well, maybe that's just the way they drive. Maybe that's the way I drive. Then we'd look at the distinctiveness and consensus. If it's low distinctiveness, that person just pretty much has sideswiped about 10 cars this week, then it's definitely about them. Or if it's low consensus, you know, no one else on the road does that. They're the only person that does that. Then it's definitely about them. If it's highly distinctive, that the only person that's happened to me is that they've done that to is me. And as it turns out, it's high consensus. I seem to be getting sideswiped by cars all the time. Maybe that's a little bit about me, right? Maybe it's where I'm sitting in people's blind spots or doing something like that. Does that make sense? So we can look at sort of an attribute behavior. But anytime we're attributing behavior, we make errors, and humans have some capacity to make some pretty significant attribution errors. So we're going to go through a few key ones here. The first one, and you got to know these, by the way, correspondence bias, or what we call the fundamental attribution error in the textbook. And it's about when we judge other people. Yeah, the initial thing is we judge others' behavior on internal dispositional qualities, right? So that person that cut me off, they're just an asshole, they're inconsiderate, they're a terrible driver. That's our default sort of setting, is this correspondence or fundamental attribution error. There's an example of that. And this is one, it's a very rusted on thing. This was an example, just quickly. We're going to be a little bit over time. Have a break in a couple of minutes. Where people were asked to write pro or anti Fidel Castro essays. When people were reading them, they're judging based on the writing. Do they think the person writing this is pro or anti Castro? Even if you told the person judging it, listen, this person, we told them that you had to write pro, you had to write anti. So in other words, this person had zero choice in whether they wrote a pro or anti. People still rated them pro if they wrote pro or anti if they rated anti. In other words, they kind of still attributed personality traits to the person, even though they were told that that had no influence on their writing at all. It's a pretty rusted on thing, that fundamental attribution error. The extension of the fundamental attribution error is called the actor-observer bias. And this is not about judging other people. It's about judging ourselves. You cut someone off in traffic. Are you just a horrible person, a bad person? Yeah. Why do you do those things? I was in a rush. They didn't give me enough room. They were trying to cut me off. They were trying to not let me in. Yeah, we've got lots of external situational factors why we do the bad stuff, right? So actor-observer bias is basically we judge ourselves by external situational factors. You know, we've always got a bit of an excuse for ourselves. We don't cut other people the same slack. We think it's, you know, more about their personality. All right, and the last one, and again, it's basically kind of another extension again. It's basically the actor-observer bias that we apply to successes and failures. So yeah, this is one, and we talked about this, I think, when we did depression in the psychological disorders last week. Not that this is naturally a fantastic thing, but it's a human, natural sort of human, it's an adaptive response, a functional response that if we have successes is to attribute them to internal dispositional factors. I did well in the exam. Yeah, I'm a smart person. I deserve it. I worked hard. That's a good thing. And to self-protect ourselves a little bit in our failures. So instead of internalizing it and saying, oh, yeah, I did terrible, I'm dumb. You know, the healthy psychological thing is to say, oh, look, it was just bad luck. I just, I was a bit stressed. I was a bit tired. Attribute it to more situational factors. Whereas we know when we look at some of the stuff in psychological disorders, particularly in depressed patients, the attributions, that self-serving bias seems to be a little bit rewired in that people externalize the successes. So someone that might be prone to depression is more likely to have this reverse attribution where the successes are externalized, situational. Yeah, I got lucky on that exam. If I did an exam, I'll probably fail it next time. Or if they fail, they internalize it. Yeah, I'm just dumb. I'm never going to get it. This is hopeless. It's not worth me even trying. And again, in a sense, by measuring some of this stuff, you can actually maybe get a sense or prediction about whether people might be prone to depression, even if they haven't experienced depression yet, because we know that that attributional style or that difference can predict it a little bit, which is quite interesting, I think. If you look at the way you look at the world, maybe, that, yeah, do you minimize your successes and just put it down to luck and external things? Do you internalize some of the failures and, think about it's just reflecting you as a person, not, just luck or situation? That's in a sense maybe predictive of whether you're likely to get, suffer from depression as well. And the last one, I touched on this a little bit as well, maybe know this because I do ask a question on it, is another application of attribution theory. Has anyone been bought flowers recently? Anyone bought flowers for somebody recently?
I did actually this week.
Bought flowers for somebody?
Yeah, my son's teacher.
Oh, there you go. So why were you buying the flowers?
She announced that she was pregnant.
Oh, there you go. And it wasn't something because you yelled at them last week about how terrible a teacher they were and you're trying to make them feel better. So no. There's an internal disposition when they're pregnant. It's a joyous moment. You want to celebrate that. If they have an internal dispositional attribution, oh, isn't that lovely? They're getting me flowers. They want to share my joy with me. Happy days. So an attribution theory predicts that relationship problems sometimes is when there's differences in external and internal attributions. Where's the other situation where people buy flowers? Someone actually said this yesterday. I told them, if you listen to, I'll put yesterday's lecture Zoom up. Said I told someone they had to buy them for me. Yeah, to get yourself out of trouble, right? So if it's an external, yeah, I'm in the bad books. If I get some flowers, and if the person that's receiving them says, yeah, well, that's good, they better have got me those flowers, they were in the bad books, that actually is predictive of relationship satisfaction. But it's where there's internal, external differences. You buy flowers for somebody out of love and they get suspicious. What have you done? Why are you buying me flowers? That's when you're more likely to have relationship dissatisfaction as well. So there's a nice little applied ending for that. You can have a little bit of a look at it. All right, let's take a 6 or 7 minute break if that's all right. There was a game I was going to play today. I'm not going to play it, but what we do have to do, and we didn't have a lot of people yesterday. So I've got our Prac 3, and remember Prac 3 will be asked on the exam. So I need to get good data for it. We'll have a break for about 6 or 7 minutes. We'll come back. It's a little bit of a task that involves some individual work, some group work, and then some more individual. So there's actually a few little tasks on it. It involves not using Google. It's pretty hard to run this one online. So the middle task involves working together in groups, but the other bit involves not looking up stuff or cheating and looking up answers. It's to do with a little bit of a knowledge question thing. So have a quick break and we'll come back. But as I said, if you can hang around and do that, that will be really good. I'll actually record who's participated and who's given me the data for this one. So we'll put it, once we score it and do this stuff, we'll put the data in Socrative. And then once we do that, the other really important thing that I want to do is just sort of do some time. So that should only take us probably, if we start back on that in about 5-10 minutes, we should be done by about 11:30, and that'll give us an hour if we need to for any assignment questions that you have. Does anyone have any assignment questions? Anything you want to clarify? So once you've done this social one, you don't have to hang around for the assignment stuff, but you definitely hang around till we get our data done, if you think you're all good with it. But I just want to give at least an hour for anyone that wants to go over anything, look at anything. How do I get the results? What do I put in the table? If you noticed, I actually put some videos up. It's from another course, but there's some videos there that actually I sent you in an email, didn't I? With the some things about hypothesis testing, writing, and particularly discussion section things in there that might give you a little bit of a feel for some extra stuff on that. All right, I'll see you in about 5 or 10. I was sharing my screen, so when I swap between PowerPoint and Word, I don't have to keep loading up new screens. How's that? You can see now what's up there. All right, who's got good geography skills? So this is going to involve some individual tasks and some group tasks. So basically, this is a nice, simple one. It's based on interpersonal processes. So I will be floating around from group to group to have a look at it. There's basically 3 parts worth 6 minutes each, and it's a really nice, simple task. If you're on the chat, I'm just sending a file through now. If this doesn't come through, just let me know. And I can send you the link, but it's also, I've already got that up on the portal page as well for week 10. So what you should have up is something that looks pretty much like me. It's got individual problem solving 1, group problem solving 2, and post-discussion individual problem solving 3. So it's basically the same tasks that we're doing 3 times. And essentially, it's a nice, simple task. All I'm asking you to do is, I've got a list of 10 countries there: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, India, Indonesia, Russia, USA. Please no Googling. Yeah, so I don't want anyone cheating and looking up answers. So you're on an honesty system now. If you're in class on campus, I'd be confiscating all your phones and laptops. But this is just a guess, so don't stress too much about this. It's not going to count towards your assessment. All you simply have to do is rank those countries by land mass. So the country you think is the largest by land mass, you'd give a 1 to. The country that you think has the smallest land mass, you'd give a 10 to. You know, so if I said, oh, Argentina, definitely that's the number 1. You know, USA is definitely the smallest country by land mass, I'd put a 10 in. And basically just make sure, definitely don't do it like me, because I don't think I'm that accurate. But basically what you need to have to make sure in there is every number from 1 through to 10. So as I said, the biggest country by land mass, give it to a 1. The smallest country, give it a 10, and then try and rank those in order as possible. Don't worry about the actual rank or the different score. Once we get through these tasks, we're going to do that. So the first task for you individually is just to rank those countries in order from 1 to 10 across those boxes. So if you've got that Word doc, did anyone not get that Word doc? Just message me if you can. I can drag the link out of the portal page. The other thing I want to do as well is not only measure your rankings, but also I want to know about how confident you are that you've got it right. So if you think, oh, I'm spot on, I've got those pretty much perfect order, maybe you're really confident you'll be up around the 10 side. If you think, I probably could have just guessed that at random and I'd probably be just as good, so you've got no confidence at all, then you give yourself a 1. Obviously moderate's around the 5 or 6. So just basically mark off one of those 10 numbers as your level of confidence. Does that make sense? All right, we're going to do this. I'll give you a few minutes to do this now. And then once we do that, I'm going to pause the lecture capture, so I'm going through it now. Then I'm going to get you into groups of maybe 3 or 4. And I'm going to actually to do the same thing, but have a group discussion to try and get a group ranking and to get a group confidence level as well. So let's get the individual one done first, and then we'll come back and do the group one. All right, I'll give you a few minutes. Yeah, so in other words, so those actual ranks, just copy them down. So once you've got those, you can copy them sort of down to the next one. And again, it's each different score. So the score that I want you to record is the overall score. So there's basically 6 scores that I'm going to get you to put in. So for the very first problem solving, I'm going to get you an overall score, and then I'm going to get you a confidence. Then you'll get a group score and a group confidence, and then a third time in post individual group, individual total score. So it's only the total score you're recording, and then the confidence level. Does that make sense? What I might do, if someone's working on this and is a little bit quicker, if you're in group 1 or group 2 or group 3, if you just want to post in the chat what group you're in and then what the overall score was and the confidence was, and we'll just confirm that the groups all get the same one. And then as they come up, we'll sort of work out, okay, this is group 1. So if you haven't finished it yet, we'll confirm that that's the correct answer.
Sorry, Tony, can you please explain it again? I accidentally logged out from Zoom.
Oh, no. So basically, the correct rankings are up here. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah. So these are the correct rankings. So first thing is get the correct rankings in next to the countries. Then you get how far, as a positive number, so don't worry about minus or plus, just all plus, how far away you were from the actual rank. So in this case, 1 from 8 is 7 away, 3 from 5 is 2 away, 7 and 7, I got it right, I give it a 0. And then once I've done that, I add up all those differences and get an overall score. So obviously the lower, if you got everything perfect, you get a score of 0. And the lower the score, the closer you got to the actual ranks. By the way, why would I ask something like landmass? And that's worth knowing too, what the DV is, what the IVs are. So the IV is the time, or we've got 3 within subjects levels of a variable, which is pre, group, and post group. Our dependent variable is the different score for rankings, and we've got another dependent variable, which is confidence interval. Why would I ask something like this?
Because geography is really abstract from what we're doing.
It's a little bit abstract from what you're doing. So in theory, I don't want a task that's so easy that everyone gets it right and then I don't get any variability in my responses. But I don't want to make it so hard that everyone's just guessing. So most people might have a sense that, Russia's bigger than France or something like that. So it's something that I'm trying to get something that you've got a little bit of knowledge about, but not something that people will be experts at and get completely right, just so I can get an idea of some variability. And again, so there's some when the group discussions come, some people might have more of an idea, less of an idea, which will maybe influence the group dynamic a little bit as well. So if anyone, what do we got? Has anyone typed theirs in? Can anyone confirm that? So Laurie says group 1 had an overall score of 8 and a confidence of 3. All right, so if you're in group 1, when it comes to that middle score in a second, overall score of 8, confidence of 3. If you're in group 2 or 3, if you want a hand, just let me know and I can help you. Group 3, Kathy says, scored 2 and a confidence of, oh, you didn't get a confidence?
No, maybe someone else might like to comment on that.
Make an executive decision, Kathy. And we'll come back and talk about that next week with the results.
Oh, please.
All right. So if you're in
Yeah.
group 2, sorry, group 3, group 2, your score is 4 and your confidence, you got to pick 5 or 6, whole number. Let's call it 6. So yeah, group 2, write down that your overall score was 4 and your confidence is 6. Got a confidence for us, Kathy? So group 1, write down in the middle set of scores. And once you do that, sorry, I'll send you the link in the chat now, actually. It's the Socrative room, which you should all know. It's the links on the portal there, but jump on a Socrative.
Alicia or Liam, 7 or 8, I don't know.
Call it 7. You got to score a 2, so. If you're having trouble getting on a Socrative or anything like that, just message me in the chat and then I can get your data manually and put it in when I do the data file in a second.
Tony, what if we don't know the age of each other's age?
This is just your age, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. How did somebody get a score of 8/9? Because if you're adding up those individual differences, they should be whole numbers. Or was that mistakenly a confidence that got put in? I think if you're still doing that, whoever's doing that one, if you go backwards, you can still go back and fix that up until it's only when you finally submit and you get the tick. Otherwise, maybe go back and edit it.
Tony, so if our scores matches the actual score, then we put 0? Like if we want to make changes.
Oh, before you add them up to get the total? Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the A's should have 8C, which would be confidence. The B's should be a 2 and a G, is that right? Not in yet. Hang on, I've got someone in group 2 that's got a 4. Someone in group 2 that's got a, oh no, that's group 3. Sorry, yeah, that's okay. Hang on, no. I've got someone in group B that's got a 4, someone in group C that's got a 4. That can't be right, can it? Because which C was a score of 2, wasn't it? Maybe you only get attendance if you actually do this properly.
I probably did the wrong calculation, but
okay. Oh, some people did it on their own rather than. So yeah, Kathy said group 3 had a confidence of 7 to go with a score of 2. Is that right? So can you see the data collection screen there?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if we look at, if I'm getting this the right way, I think column 4 is our first score individually. Column 6 is our group score. And we'll do this while people are still filling in the data. Column 8 is our final score. So I've got a person here that's gone from 14, improved to 8 in the group, and improved even more individually after being in the group. Yeah. We've got people that have gone from improving in the group from 12 to 2 and then getting worse. So why is that happening? Didn't believe the group. Have we got anyone? Oh, there's someone here. We've got someone that was actually 2 in the group, got worse, and then went back to their 2 again.
That would be Josh.
Oh, is that right? We won't name names, seeing it's an anonymous survey. Yeah. So there's some different patterns in the data there, but just to go over that really quickly, if you're still filling that out, fill it in. As I said, I'm going to crunch all the numbers and we're going to talk about this next week. In relation to the, can you see my PowerPoint? Yeah. So basically the idea is, you know, most decisions are made by groups, you know. So we elect politicians to represent us, then they get together with other politicians and make policies. What's the theory of groups? Well, in assuming that if you get people with unique talents, attributes, they come together and they make a better decision than the group as a whole, than individuals. Is that always true? Not necessarily. I'm going to talk about that next week, but we'd assume that that's why groups are formed. So in terms of the hypotheses, and I'll talk about this a little bit more next week, but I thought I'll go over it quickly here. We would predict, if that's true, that groups should become more accurate. So they're going to get a lower score, they're going to make fewer errors, and their confidence might increase than the average of the individuals that provide that. And as I said, if you look at the data, it looked as though most people, the group scores was better than the individual scores. So there did seem to be some evidence of that. I didn't look at the confidence, but that's something you can look at as well. The other thing is, well, what happens after being in a group? So if the groups have got better, does that have a lasting effect? Does that group interaction then influence your subsequent thoughts, feelings, behavior, your subsequent psychology? And we had some evidence there that, not to name names again, but some people, the group didn't influence your individual responses afterwards. Why might that be? And we'll look at the statistics to see which way it goes on that. Names on a screen. If we were doing this in person in a classroom and you're interacting and you've been talking to each other and interacting all trimester, do you think that might influence the group dynamics a little bit? Maybe trust in the group, all those sorts of things. That's the stuff we're going to talk about a little bit next week as well. Whereas some people, yeah, they might actually, that group actually, then you saw that evidence in a couple of individual cases. So obviously we don't look at individual cases. We want to make decisions about groups as a whole. So that's the sort of thing we're going to talk about as well. I did see some evidence of that. So how many people, we're going to talk about influence and social influence. How many people were in a situation where you went, oh, this person sounds like they know what they're talking about? I'll probably go with them because I'm not really sure. I'm not big on geography. Was there any evidence of that?
We did the opposite.
That is...
You should have listened to Josh. He said he was good at geography.
That's why
called,
I listened to him for the third one, and then I did better, and I was like, damn it.
That's called informational influence. And that's sometimes an important thing, right? You think, this person looks smarter. They've got a PhD in front of their name. They're wearing a white lab coat. I'll trust that person that they know what they're doing. And for good and bad, right? Was anyone in a situation where then in between, there's a third one I'll talk about in a sec, but where you kind of went, look, I think these people are getting it wrong, but hang on, before I haven't finished answering the question, but I'm not going to speak up. I'm just going to stay quiet and kind of let it all happen. Yeah. Anyone in that situation? I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to say anything. It's only a group thing. I'll just go with the flow. And there's evidence of that. So that could be something, and that's where we talk about true influence, or what we call normative social influence, where you kind of actually, you make your decisions based on judgments about other people. The third one that I don't normally talk about is maybe you express that, and then for some group dynamic reasons, the group didn't take on your suggestions. Yeah, so that's some of the interesting things, right, in the dynamics. And again, we'll unpack some of that as we do the learning content. Hopefully you've got assignments done by next week. So you'll be able to maybe watch last week's lecture capture and this week's lecture capture, and put all those things together. Any other questions or comments? No?
Yeah, Tony, sorry. What about the Prac 3? I mean, the individual problem solving 3, isn't it the same as the first one, like the individual? Well,
it could be, but the idea is maybe you might go back to what you originally said. Maybe you go, you know what, the people in the group knew what they were doing. My answers for the third one are going to be more like the group's one. So I'm going to actually take advantage of what the group sort of thing was, and I'm going to change my answers from the first time based on what the group told me. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, although some people might have just gone, you know what, I'm staying exactly as I am. Some of these scores just don't match up at all, because the group scores, the group scores should be the same. I'll have a sift through them anyway. All right. Any other questions or comments on this part of it? What I might do, we'll have a quick break again, just 5 minutes, and I'll just download this data and get some of that stuff sorted. But officially, if you participated in that and you've recorded your scores, your attendance is completed for today. So you don't have to hang around for the next 45 minutes or so. But for those people that want to have a chat about assignments, details, questions, I've just posted the Zoom recording when I had a little break before from yesterday. I did record some of that Zoom recording, and people have asked some just really simple sorts of questions that were, important sorts of things about R values and P values and things like that. So if you're looking for a bit of extra stuff from today, you'll put that up. I'll put that up for you. But as I said, I might record this as well in a second. And if there's anything that sort of doesn't overlap with yesterday, I might post this bit up as well, just for anyone that wants to get some last minute help. But yeah, it's basically questions, as I said. If it's a question that you think, this is something that other people might want to know as well. But I think a few people were worried about asking questions and thinking, I know I should have known that already. It's the little things. I can't remember. There was a couple off the top of my head that it was something I went, I probably didn't explain that well. So yeah, 5 minutes and we'll come back. And as I said, we'll do a little Q&A. Anything you want to have a look at as far as assignments, go back and look at stuff. All right, I'll see you in a sec. So I'll record this just in case there's something that people might want to listen to on the weekend. So questions, anyone got anything off the top of their head? Like I said, I did a bit of a Zoom recording yesterday. It's at the end of the posted Zoom recording in week 10. No specific questions? Just a general, as I said, if you want to listen, watch the Zoom, I went over a few of these things, but just please make sure, it's going to be on a different screen. Please make sure you've got the template document. And you work off that, because probably one of the worst things that I come across from a well-being perspective for both of us is I see like this Word documented big colory title page, none of the headings and the spacing and all the same sorts of things. Remember this you can see the template, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just make sure you keep the headings, the bolds, the bits in italics, all that stuff in there. And like I said, if you kind of follow that along, you're in pretty good shape as well. Just things, couple of things, describe and define the first variable you have chosen. Don't start this paragraph off saying the first variable I have chosen is. You know what I mean? If the first variable you have chosen is empathy, then just start talking about empathy. You know, research has indicated one important psychological consequence of violent media consumption is empathy. Empathy could be defined as and then get into the links and stuff like that. Another variable also that has been associated with violent media consumption is physical aggression. You know, physical aggression. So yeah, don't say this my second variable, my first variable. Take about all those references as well. Hypotheses is something to have a look at. Now, just on hypotheses, I'll come back if you've got more questions on that. Where are we? I have added an extra little hang on, where are we? An extra sub-chapter on the lab reporting guide. This is what I sent the link to in the email. If you're sort of trying to get your head around the hypotheses, this hypothesis and method writing tips, just to give you some ideas about hypotheses, participants, procedure, is not a bad little instructional video to look at. It's actually set up for my stats course. So some of it's not relevant. If it's something you've never heard me talk about, don't worry about it. But just things that it talks about when you're writing these hypotheses up. Sorry, privacy breach there. Where's my Word doc gone? Yeah, like it was hypothesized that. So no first person, no we hypothesize. So it's third person, not first or second person. Past tense rather than current tense. You know, not the aim of the study is for this, the aim of the study was. A lot of things like that, it does go over it in a bit of detail. The one on results section, you can have a look at it, but don't panic when you see this one, because when we do the statistics course, we actually do all our results and descriptive, and it tells about lots and lots of stuff we're doing. There's only a couple of little things to focus on as far as sort of tables and referring to tables that are relevant. But the writing the discussion one for this one is not too bad, because it talks about, you know, how to restate your aims, say the hypotheses, link to the research, you know, talk about implications, limitations of your research, suggestions for future research, maybe conclusions. So if you're doing a discussion section, you're struggling with the discussion, that's definitely worth a look as well. So as I said, I thought I'd add those in there because they do help a little bit. But definitely use the template. Sorry, where are we? Back again. Use the template. As I said, check the assignment marking criteria. You know, so when you've written them up, just make sure, you know, have I introduced the topic, the aim, the rationale, you know, make sure in that first chapter of the paragraph of the intro, you give me some statistics maybe on how prevalent violent media is. And, you know, why is this an important topic for us to have a look at is important as well. Make sure you reference. So the biggest thing I pull up in the introduction is you make some statements about violent media or what it is, what it's related to, but it's just the end of a sentence with no reference. You've got to make sure you reference all your ideas in that one as well. And as I said, yeah, if you're checking it all off, have I done this bit? You know, most of that's pretty straightforward. Like I said before, if you're doing participants, total number, gender breakdown, age, mean and standard deviation, look at the APA on that, that's the way you report that as well. Make sure you mention, you know, that the participants included undergraduate psychology students, as well as a community sample of friends and family recruited by the students. Make sure you put in that 339, the total number. And if you want to talk about 41 students and 298 friends and family recruited by the students, you can, but make sure you talk about the total number, age, gender breakdown, procedure. Yeah, talk about what the instructions were, what people did, you know, online survey links, etc., etc. You know, that a link was provided and the students were asked to share the link with friends, etc., etc. Make sure, yeah, you talk about how long it took, you know, approximately 20 minutes for that one. And again, for your measures, make sure you do the variable name. And like I said, we did this last week a little bit as well. Violent media you can keep, you don't have to change exactly as it is. But when you do those other variables, just make sure there's nothing that says variable one name. Change that to whatever your variable is. I've had a couple of questions yesterday about anchor points for the scale and things like that. Yeah, when it says scale anchors, that just means basically, that participants will ask 9 questions, their agreement to 9 questions, e.g., and you put a question in on a scale from 1 equals strongly disagree to 7 equals strongly agree. That one as well. The other thing I need to mention too, a lot of people say that the variable was summed and averaged. Yeah, it wasn't averaged in this case. The items were actually summed. Yeah, the averages, those means were in there. That was what we did once we measured the variable. So this is about how we measure it. So you answer 9 questions on a scale from 1 to 7. I add up those scores and you'll get a score from 9 to 63. Then that's your measurement. That's your score on that variable. Then when I'm doing the descriptive statistics later on in the results, I say, well, here's the mean for everyone on average, the average score on that variable. But when we're saying what the variable is, sometimes instead of adding up everyone's scores and summing them, I might just get the average of all your scores. Does that make sense? So instead of saying, well, you answered 1, strongly disagree to all 9, so you get a score of 9, I might just add up those and divide by 9 and say, well, your average score individually was 1, and then I add up everyone's averages, but it wasn't for this one. So just take away the average bit there, but definitely talk about, what a high score indicates for those ones as well. Does that make sense? Results, as I said, go to week 8, our Prac 2 write-up. That will give you a really nice template about how to look at it, and it gives you an idea about how to put all the tables together. I spent a little bit of time on Zoom yesterday in that, so if you want to go and watch that Zoom recording, you'll see a little bit of that as well. Yeah, but as I said, just like honestly, if you stick to the template, I did get a question yesterday just to repeat on Turnitin and the percentage overlap. Some people are getting a little bit panicky for it. And particularly if you showed that percentage to one of the academic skills people, they'd probably have a heart attack. If you've got to Turnitin around maybe 35, 40%, I wouldn't necessarily panic too much, because the method section and the results section particularly will probably look pretty similar, because I've said, I've given you a pretty close example to follow for the results. If the Turnitin's really red because of the intro and the method and the discussion, I should say, that's where it's going to be a bit of a panic. So yeah, so the percentage isn't as important as where the percentage happens for it. Please don't misattribute. Look at the academic integrity stuff. You should have been doing that with academic skills. What do they say? Ignorance is no excuse of the law. So yeah, don't copy anything, big chunks of information. Please don't just put stuff in quotes. You don't need to do that. I want to hear that you can understand what you're reading. So try and paraphrase, put it in your own words. That's a really important thing as well. The other thing too, just to note, in APA, unless you're directly quoting, so you've got the inverted commas to around, did I just do air quotes? I hope I didn't. If you've got the inverted commas around, the text and you've referenced it, yes, you need a page number. But if you're just paraphrasing, you don't have to add the page number to your reference. You just need the, author, surname, and the year, the normal way as well. Yeah. All right. So any other specific questions? Anyone feeling really stuck or lost on it, or? Am I still online? I've got no way of knowing.
Yes, you are.
Anything else? No one's brave enough just to ask something.
I've just got the questions about mine that I'll talk about.
Yeah, specifics. That's okay. Yeah, hang around. We'll do the specific stuff.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, you go.
Just quickly, I have a few questions, but because I'm not sure, should I email you those questions so that it won't take too much time?
You can, if you like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Kathy, did you?
I was just going to ask about word count.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I talked about it yesterday. Who sent me one? I don't know if someone was here, but I did get one. Yeah, yesterday that was like up around taking out all the other stuff. So I went over that in the Zoom yesterday, but to go over again, like this template document says 1392 words. So when you're trying to work out your word count, don't go purely on that. That's the first thing that shows up to me. And if you say 1,387 words and your word count is 2,150 or something, then I'm going to go, hang on. Even if you've got a bit over, I'll probably have a little question mark on it. So that's probably a note to me to go, hang on, is that actually right? Because it doesn't look right. And I go on page numbers and things as well. So what counts and what doesn't count? The title page and the abstract don't count in your word count. So I can take 140 off that 1392. Does that make sense? So I'm actually only 1,250 words or 1,252 words for it. I can take off the table, which is another 46 words. So I'm actually down to about 1,200 words. And I don't have to include the reference list, which is 61 words there. Does that make sense? So yeah, so you can take those bits off, but the rest of it will go. So when you say the word count, can I go over? If the actual proper word count, when you take away those things, is less than 10% over, I'm unlikely to get too upset about it. Yeah. So technically, if you're over 1,650, then you probably lose marks. Try not to go over that much. If you can get sort of to max 1,600 words, if you're about 100 words over, I tend not to get too upset as long as it's, you know, relevant stuff as well. But yeah, more than that, and there's a risk that you'll get penalised.
I was counting the table and the abstract, so that'll help.
Yeah, yeah. And as I said, one of the easiest things to do, and I talked about this before, you know, if you're using violent media consumption for the first time, I downloaded this, didn't I? Like, the autosave kills me because I keep saving over when I mess around with this stuff. The first time you talk about violent media consumption, call it VMC, and then every other time you talk about it, well, just to give you an example, I've got 17 results there. Which means basically I've got 3 words every time I do that. If I basically change violent media consumption in all those ones to VMC, well, the first one, I've got to actually have it in there. I've cut down 32 words basically just by using VMC. That's not a bad way to do it. You might have, and you might do the same thing if you've got tolerance of violence or something where there's more than one word, empathy or whatever. I guess you could do it for physical aggression, call it PA or something. It's probably not a, VMC is probably a bit better because it's something that, you know, you do need to shorten because it's quite long. But if it's, yeah, that's another way you can get your word count. If you're trying to do it, what I would look for in the introduction, if you tell me about other research and you spend a bit of time talking about what their participants were and they measured at this and what their IVs and DVs and things like that, that's probably where you can trim it up. You know, reference it, Smith et al., you know, in brackets 2009, on a study of, you know, the effect of violent media on empathy showed that, but you know, just get the nice, concise results. You know, something just, yeah, you could probably cut down when you're talking about other research a little bit more as well. But yeah, if don't go over 1650 when you're excluding those other things. How close are you, Kathy? Are you a fair way over?
Not too bad. I haven't finished my discussion yet, and that's where I'm a bit concerned how much is going to be in there.
Yeah, in the discussion, obviously you can go to town on some of the sort of limitations and implications and things like that. What's one of the key limitations of the study?
That it's only correlational.
Yeah, because it's correlational, we can't, you know, and we talked about that, and I spent a lot of time on Zoom on that, making sure that your hypotheses weren't about cause and effect. If you said, you know, violent media, a study of the violent media's effect on something or other in your title, that's probably not a great title. If you said, does violent media affect ... question mark, you'd probably get away with that because you're not sort of saying you're testing causation, you know, but you can still say, yes, there's a correlation. Maybe, you know, there is a relationship. There's some evidence here that it could be causal, but you've got to be careful with that. But that's the key one to have in there. There's quite a few other limitations we've talked about. As long as you've got, you know, along with the correlation isn't necessarily causation one. As long as you've got one other decent limitation, then you're in pretty good shape. Do you know what I mean? So you don't have to list 5 different limitations as well. But if you do, just make sure when you say there's a limitation that you actually explain what that limitation might be. Do you know what I mean? So if you just said, yes, a limitation is it's only done on psychology students and their friends. Okay, why is that a limitation?
So if you put that in as a limitation, you have to explain why it is or how it's affected it.
Yeah. So what's the problem with that? Having it just on psychology students and their friends?
Self-reporting.
Oh, that's another one, potential self-report bias. So we can't say it's bias because they're self-reporting, but if anytime we measure, you know, we're getting people to self-report information, there's a potential for bias that we could talk about. But that one there, what's the problem with being psychology students?
Well, like I guess a fear of being judged. So you might kind of change your answers to inline what's acceptable.
Oh yeah, that's a bit Freudian, but yeah.
It's not randomized.
Yeah, it's not a random sample of the population. So if you said limitation was it was only psychology students' friends, which may impact the ability to generalize the results to a broader population. Yeah, does that make sense? So that's the sort of stuff that you want to be talking about. Anything else? No other questions, comments? Like I said, I spent a bit of time. There's quite a long Zoom recording of bits and pieces from yesterday. So if you want to jump onto that one and have a look. Oh, the other thing I added too, and I think I talked about this yesterday, was the oh, sorry. Yeah, I think it's on the Zoom recording. If anyone's, where are we? Have I got my screen shared? Have it swapped over now, or is it still in the Word doc?
It's on the criteria.
Yeah, so it's back on that.
Yeah.
I gave you like a starting journal article. Does that ring some bells? Yeah, so this had just some things like, as I said, in the first chapter, you want to talk about, you know, why is it worth doing this? You know, there's some really, you know, some stats here you could talk about. 97% of kids play video games. The majority of them, you know, have violent content. You know, you could use that as a reference, or you could talk about, you know, that, you know, an American study showed, you can reference it. So if you want to use this as a bit of a starting thing, because this is a few nice little statistics, it has got some stuff on some of the variables we're measuring in there as well, but it's a nice little starting point, and it just gives you an idea. And this is the idea, is this, you know, say, look, there's a lot of violent media consumption going on. So you might want to drop something like that in just to say how widespread, you know, violent media is. If you're doing that, just give me 2 secs. doesn't copy across properly, I don't think. I'll try it. When you reference it, because a couple of people asked me yesterday, or have asked me about referencing it. If you're doing that one, no, make sure you get all the font the same, but basically, oops. That's what, why has it done that? That would be your reference. Don't forget the hanging indents for your reference, by the way. So yeah, so if you were quoting it in text, you know, you talk about American Association of Family Physicians, or if you're doing it, you know, you were just saying how widespread it was. And then you put the quote at the end of the sentence. 2019, you know, so if you gave some statistics for that, that's how you'd reference it. But if you want to actually make a note of that, that's basically how you'd reference it in APA or ish. Like I said, I'm not an expert at APA, but that's kind of close enough. So violence in the media, entertainment. I think the position paper part of it isn't italicized. It's just the actual title itself. But if you want to dive into APA, some of the other ones, like a little bit harder, because it's actually not a published journal article. It's actually a position paper. So I probably shouldn't have picked that one to use because it's a little bit harder to reference. But I thought if you are referencing it, that's what you should have in your reference list. Don't forget in your reference to put all your scale items in there as well. You know, so when you've got those scale results, yeah, which they're pretty much, apart from a hanging indent, they're already done for you. Those ones there, all you've really got to do is copy that in, reference it in text. Remember, no initials when you're doing the in-text reference. Oh, where are we going? Oh, look at that, it's automatically formatted. But yeah, just obviously just check all your fonts and stuff like that. Make sure they're all consistent, the spacing. Sometimes you automatically get paragraph spaces. So just make sure you go through, it's double line space and it's all zero spacing before or after. You don't get an extra space, which is kind of what Word does by default. If I was doing that in-text referencing and I was talking about religiosity or something, well, I better not say recent. So if I put that, how do I actually reference this?
Nunmaker et al.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't put JM or put surnames. 3 or more authors, I can put et al. From the start. That's the nice thing. It used to be only 6 or more for the first time. So you'd have to put all the authors up to 6 the first time. And then after that, so if there was 5 authors, you'd have to write them all out. Then you could put et al. Now you can start with et al. if there's at least 3 or more. Just check your spelling on the references too. So how do I do et al. Again? Come on, where's my academic skills people?
ET and then space and then AL in lowercase.
Oh, that's right.
With a punctuation mark. With the dot, I can't remember the
dot, comma.
Yep. And then you do in brackets the date. Yep.
Yeah, so just simple things like that. You know, don't put you see so many like et.als or the other way around or something like that. You know, check your APA. Oh, I'll do it the right way so you can see it there. Yeah, go to Redbook. Remember, Redbook's really good. I've got links for all that stuff as well. Put .org. Maybe. Oh, no, maybe not. Yeah, so go to Redbook, spend a bit of time on that. If it's looking pretty good, you know, go through and look at some of the structures, referencing. There's heaps of good stuff in there. There's some nice things here about writing concisely, developing arguments. There's some really good stuff. This is a really, really good website if you spend a bit of time on there as well. I'd hopefully removing expletives. Do you think I would have to ask that? Is that something that anyone would think about? I could show you some horrific stuff that people have put in assignments. Yeah, avoiding the expletives is very, very important. But there's ways you can do that with APA formatting. Do you just put all the ampersands and hashes and all that stuff? Is that right? On the letters? Any other questions? All right, if we're good, then as I said, if you've got anything else, I've sort of started getting a little bit more swamped with people sort of suddenly deciding they want feedback now. As I think I said the other week, that I've got cognitive and biological psychology assignments that I'm trying to churn through before yours is due on Monday. So I do have quite limited time. But, you know, as I said, I'd send me something and at least I'll try if I can to give you some bit of feedback. It just might not be sort of super in-depth feedback, unfortunately. But I will try and do my best for you. Yeah. Any other questions, as I said, if you've got any worries about it, let me know. Otherwise, have a fantastic week. And yeah, as who's going to, oh, Melanie's going to hang around, is that right?
Yes.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, Tony.
Pleasure. Good luck. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Mine's just as painful as yours. Marking and doing them are pretty bad.
Bye.
Just make them perfect. Just make them perfect for me. And then I don't have to put many comments on it. I say, great, great, great. There you go. 30 out of 30.
I'll try my best.
You know, and it's super quick to mark, super quick to read. Yeah. I think the sad thing is sometimes I spend so much time sometimes putting comments on, and then when you look at it, nobody's actually even looked at it. They've just looked at the mark in the grade center and that's it. So I tend now to I do put some stuff on it, but I tend to do a feedback later and say, you know, here's all the stuff you talk about. Yeah, but I think you got lucky, Britt. I think I said, didn't I? I was sitting in the car waiting.
You were sitting in the car
I got stuck waiting for my daughter, and I jumped on my laptop and just hotspotted, and you had one there. So you got really good feedback, I think, on yours.
Yeah, I'm going to work on it after
yours was sort of twice as good, just because I had time to kill.
Thank you.
All right, no worries. All right, thanks everyone else.
May I stick around after?
Oh yeah, do you want to just, if you want to just, can you jump off, Kevin?
Yeah. Right.
And then jump back on. How long do you reckon, Melanie? 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Yeah, jump back on in 10 minutes if that's all right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll definitely have a chat.
See ya in 10.
No worries. All right. I might You there, Rainbow?
I don't think she's had a mic the whole time.
Yeah, that's all right.
There it is.
I'll do some manual. Yeah, all right. So yours is in pretty good shape.
It is? Cool. Yeah, my one...
sorry, you just sent me something. I just checked in the break. Is that right? You sent me an email.
Yeah, I did. Because my one concern currently, I'm doing fine on the empathy variable, but with my tolerance of violence, I can't actually find a referenced definition of tolerance of violence, but I find multiple things about desensitization. And so it's kind of like, does tolerance of violence cause desensitization, or is desensitization also another word for tolerance of violence?
Tolerance of violence would be, Desensitization would more be the sort of the cognitive process that leads to tolerance of violence. So tolerance of violence is more like a sort of a behavioral outcome, whereas desensitization seems to be that kind of internal process that makes you more tolerant to violence, if that makes sense.
Okay then.
Yeah, but don't get too hung up on that. As long as you just make that clear.
Okay then. So you said desensitization is more of an emotional process?
Yeah.
Oh wait, cognitive process. Sorry, that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's where I've gotten, like I Google like on Procrest and all of that, and it always just talks about desensitization.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can I just have one on like tolerance, please? And there's not much.
Yeah, there is stuff in there. It's just sometimes hard to search for when it's multiple words and things like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, like I tried to find the actual the paper that we use for the scale, but like I can't actually access it anywhere.
Say again.
The so the attitudes towards violence scale, I can't actually access that anywhere.
Did we not look for that or something? Didn't we do that the other day? No.
I don't know, but I found the abstract, but and I think if I was a Griffith University student, I could access it, but because I'm a Griffith College student, it keeps coming up with this thing that tells me, because you're a Griffith College student, this is what you can access, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, hang on, just give me 2 secs and I'll see if I can. No, okay. Hang on, I'll just get rid of. Which one was it again?
It's the.
Oh, you haven't done your reference list, have you?
No, I just started doing it just then, actually. It's the Attitudes Towards Violence Scale, a measure for adolescence, which is by Funk et al.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really need to look it up, but you were more looking it up to try and get it as a reference.
Yeah, as a definition, yeah, because that's what I did as well for empathy, because empathy is a really big one as well. Like, I've attempted to keep empathy quite simple, but of course, like that could be. I think I could use that as a limitation of, because it was quite a simple use of empathy. You could go more into trait and state empathy, and it's a whole thing.
Where's my chat gone? See if that comes through. I think, what did I save it in? I've just sent a PDF to you in the chat.
Okay. Oh, yep, found it. Aha, I found it. Awesome.
You're good?
Yeah, I think this will definitely help.
Yeah, it's a bit dated, but that's no dramas.
That's okay. It's just trying to make sure.
There's quite a lot of references they cite in that one that you probably might be able to
have a look at.
Yeah.
Awesome. That will be great. Yeah, I just need to tidy up my tolerance of violence introduction, my discussion, and then get an abstract. But yeah, if you could have a read of it, that would be great.
What's your word count like? Oh, it's not too bad.
I have no idea yet because I haven't finished.
Yeah, like stuff like that.
Yeah, that can go.
Anything, the yellow stuff, they're not average, so that one you'd actually would get rid of.
What I got rid of that? What did I do? Oh, okay. I see where I went.
Yeah, all your stats are good. Yeah, your limitations, that's fine. Measures are good. Larger group of measures. We covered that bit of stuff too.
Yeah, I think we did that before. It was the introduction that I hadn't smashed out yet.
Yeah, so this one, if you want to count the word count, you just put
okay.
Oh, TOF. Oh, you know, I'm going, why would I write that? It's got, you've got TOF there.
Oh, crap.
TOV, yeah, do that. And then that takes, yeah, so you don't need to know now known as, just make sure, that you've got it sort of capitalized.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, that's all taking shape. Yeah, when you've said negative and positive, just maybe put in words, you know, with higher empathy associated with lower VMC.
Yeah, okay then.
Yeah, or, and then tolerance of violence, you know. Yeah, although I would probably word them the other way around. I think, did we mention that? Because you've really kind of VMC is the IV and the other one's your DV. So yeah. So just like if you swap the VMC and empathy, and just say so higher violent media consumption VMC is associated with lower empathy. See, so you might even put the first hypothesis, just swap those around. Therefore, it is predicted that higher violent media is associated with less empathy and higher tolerance to violence. You know, as a third sentence, that would be okay too, because then you're sort of mentioning the direction as well as using the words positive and negative.
Yep, okay then, I can definitely do that.
But that's all taking shape.
Okay, awesome.
If you want to have a quick look on the weekend, just let me know.
Yep. Okay then, cool. Yeah, I'm going to try and finish this today. That would be nice. But we'll see.
Cool. Yeah,
right, then.
You're better off doing a little bit more and then, like, because it's on track, like none of it's, you know, off track or anything that looking at it that you need to, it's just more of just tightening it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like honestly, if you just handed that in exactly as it is now, you'd pass easily still.
Oh, cool. I would like to do more than pass, but yes.
Yeah, yes, yeah, exactly right. So you don't want to, obviously, yeah.
Don't want to be reliant on like acing the next exam.
Yeah, you do want to put an abstract in and put your word count in. Oh, just on that, just, yeah, I would put just in that
Still
one.
Working on the title. I'm not sure if I like it just yet.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Don't agonize over it. That's
all
fine.
right then. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
The fact that you got a question mark. Yeah.
Oh, the question.
And I would probably, if I'm not the world's best English person, I would change the affect to effect.
Effect, yeah.
Because you're asking whether violent media is effecting something.
Oh,
rather than.
Yep.
Yeah. Is empathy and tolerance to violence affect, you know?
Yep, so just take out the question mark.
Yeah, external versus, yeah, I am affected by things, but I can effect change.
Gotcha, yep.
Yeah. Don't quote me on that though, my English is not real good, but.
No, that's okay. All right then, well, I'll do some more of this and yeah, I'll try and send you something even this afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, then thank you so much, Tony.
Cool. All right, see ya.
Bye.